Okay, so let me put that question back on here. If I can get this to do what I wanted. Okay, so it was solve for y. And I have 5y squared minus 20y is equal to 0. Okay, so once again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to break the question apart. I see solve. Solve tells me that I've got to get numerical answers. Then I go to the equation itself. I see that's an equation, okay? I notice that the degree or the highest power is 2. That tells me I'm going to get 2 solutions. So since this is now a quadratic, I've decided it's a quadratic. Quadratic means raised to the power of 2, highest power is 2. Then I know, since it's a quadratic, I have to get it in that standard form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. That's your standard form, okay? So what I'm looking for is the equation that they gave me equal to 0? And the answer is yes. So now, okay, now I've broken that apart. Like these are all the things I'm thinking about whenever I work this problem. So the next thing that I think about is, okay, now I know it has to be factored because it is a quadratic equation because it had that power of 2. So now I break into my head, okay, so how do I factor? So I go back to that list of how do I factor? So the first step, I think, does it have a greatest common factor? Remember, I talked to you guys about that being the trump thing. Like if you're playing cards or you're playing dominoes, there's a trump suit in cards, and when you play dominoes, whatever piece goes in the middle, that's like the most important piece, right? 5s. So you're basing everything off of 5s or whatever. So it's the same thing. So the biggest thing in factoring is greatest common factor. So that's where I always start. I ask myself, okay, do these two terms have anything in common? They do. So what do they have in common? A 5 and what else? And a y. So I need to factor out 5y. So whenever I factor out 5y, remember that greatest common factor, I'm going to put you a little note under here, greatest common factor is undistributing. So we know that we take the distributive property, and so that's what it should look like, and that's kind of where I'm going right now. It's going to look like the distributive property, okay? So what has to be in the first part of my parentheses to get this 5y squared back? A y, that is correct. And then minus what comes in the second part? A 4, that is correct. Okay, so it's still an equation. I still haven't solved it yet. How many y's do y'all see up there right now? 2 y's. Okay, so those 2 y's are going to be the things that produce your answers. So it's factored now. How do I know it's factored? What does it mean to factor? Factor means to break it down into multiplication. So it is broken down into multiplication. This is 5y times y minus 4. So now I break the two factors apart and I set them equal to 0. So I get 5y equals 0 or y minus 4 equals 0, and that's where I'm going to get my 2 solutions from. Okay, so to get my first solution, I have to isolate the y, so I'll divide by 5. Okay, so I'll get y is equal to 0 divided by 5, which is 0. Or to get my second solution, what would I have to do? Add 4. Okay, and I would get y is equal to 0 plus 4, which is 4. So now I have 2 solutions. That means that if I took 0 and I plugged it in, it's going to make that equation true. That's true, because I mean I'd have 5 times 0 minus 20 times 0, which is 0 minus 0, which is 0, okay? And 0 equals 0, so that one works, it's true. And then plugging in the 4, what would that look like? It would look like this, 5 times 4 squared minus 20 times 4, okay? So I'm testing that 4 to make sure it works. So that would be 5 times 16. 20 times 4 is 80. And if you multiplied 5 times 16, that's 80. So I'd have 80 minus 80, and 80 minus 80 is 0. And that's what I was supposed to get. So the 0 works and the 4 works, so we have 2 solutions. Okay, so what's the most important thing do y'all think to remember about this type of problem? Factoring. That's exactly right. And remembering your types of factoring. If this had been a trinomial, what would you have done? This was a binomial. So if it was a trinomial, how would you have factored it? You would have needed to check for GCF first, and then what would you have done? I would do the x. That's exactly right, Tristan. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? My report that I ran says that 92% of you, which means just about everybody, because we have a couple people who are still listed on my roll. I need to hide them. They're not in class anymore. We have a few people that have dropped. And so I'm counting y'all. This means probably everybody in here. You're going to all get this question within the next few times whenever you get on. Okay? Any other questions about this one? Everybody feel okay about it? Okay, y'all just got to remember all those steps, all the steps.